Globally, in the 1970s, the world was hit with a major culture shock when punk rock emerged, changing the music scene with a bang as a means to drown out the hippie movement of the preceding 1960s. Bands like the Ramones, The Clash, and Sex Pistols made a crater of an impact on fashion, politics, and performance arts, and was truly a turning point in music history. In the 1960s, a new subculture emerged known as the hippie movement, also known as the flower people. The main fundamentals of this movement were harmony with nature, communal living, artistic experimentation, sexual experimentation, and the widespread use of recreational drugs. The Merry Pranksters were a group that originally formed around American novelist Ken Casey, considered one of the most prominent figures in the psychedelic movement, and sometimes lived communally at his homes in California and Oregon. The Merry Pranksters took a lengthy road trip in 1964, traveling across the United States in a psychedelically painted school bus, enigmatically named Further and for the Acid Tests. Casey believed that psychedelics were best used as a tool for transforming society as a whole, and believed that if a sufficient percentage of the population had the psychedelic experience, then revolutionary social and political changes would occur. Therefore, they made LSD available to anyone interested in partaking. Much of the hippie style had been integrated into mainstream American society. Mustaches, beards, sideburns, and longer hair became mainstream, and colorful, multi-ethnic clothing dominated the fashion world. Psychedelic hard rock, emerging from the hippie movement, was the first of the psychedelic subgenres to reach the top of the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 songs in 1966, with Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones, though the British rock band Pink Floyd formed in 1965 and was at the forefront of 1960s psychedelia. Many genres that first appeared in the 1970s also incorporated psychedelic influences in the beginning, such as soft rock and disco, though they soon developed their own sounds that were distinct from psychedelic music. Another genre and subculture in the 1970s as well, known as punk rock. Punk rock. The anti-mainstream, anti-establishment, anti-commercial, and very angry subgenre swept the world as we knew it. As did early hip-hop in the United States, punk rock embodied a do-it-yourself, aka DIY, attitude. Many bands were self-produced and self-recorded. Punk fashion was characterized by its edgy, unconventional, and anti-establishment aesthetic. Some key elements of punk fashion include ripped clothing, safety pins as accessories, band t-shirts, leather jackets, fishnet stockings, and combat boots. The style often involved intentionally worn-out or distressed garments, as well customizations such as patches, studs, and graffiti. These punk trends challenged the traditional notions of fashion and presented a form of self-expression that was raw, individualistic, and nonconformist. The punk movement attracted people who didn't feel they belonged in society, but didn't seek to escape it. Their ideologies and political contests have their origins in this feeling of exclusion. They question the place of the individual and their freedoms in society, making freedom of expression and thinking for oneself the center of their philosophy. The famous slogan, "No Future," is a perfect illustration of the image they have of society. According to the Ramones drummer, Tommy Ramone, in its initial form, a lot of 1960s stuff was innovative and exciting. Unfortunately, what happened is that people who could not hold a candle to the likes of Hendrix started noodling away. Soon you had endless solos that went nowhere. By 1973, I knew what was needed was some pure, stripped-down, no bullshit and roll. John Holstrom, founding editor of Punk magazine, recalls feeling, "Punk rock had to come along because the rock scene had become so tame that acts like Billy Joel, Simon, and Garfunkel were being called rock and roll, when to me and other fans, rock and roll meant this wild and rebellious music." According to Robert Christgau, punk scornfully rejected the political idealism and California flower power silliness of hippie myth. Bands such as the previously mentioned Ramones, The Clash, and Sex Pistols were some of the most influential bands of the time. The Ramones were an American punk rock band formed in the New York City neighborhood of Forest Hills, Queens, in 1974. Known for helping establish the punk movement in the United States, the Ramones are often cited as the first true punk band. Most of their songs are very fast and short. Most of them lasted less than 2 minutes. On August 16, 1974, the Ramones made their debut at CBGB's. Legs McNeil, co-founder of Punk magazine, later recalled the scene. They were all wearing black leather jackets, and they were counting off this song, and it was just a wall of noise, and they looked so striking. They weren't hippies. They were something else. Then there is The Clash, an English rock band that formed in London in 1976 and played a key role in the original wave of British punk music. The band was billed as the only band that matters. They contributed to the post-punk and new wave movements that followed punk. The Clash has incorporated elements from various genres such as reggae, dubs, funk, ska, and rockabilly. Though influential at the time, they aren't as well known as other punk rock bands. Most important, though, is Sex Pistols, one of the most highly revered punk rock bands. You can go ask your mom, grandma, teacher, or anybody at all, and they have at least heard the name. There were only 40 people in attendance when the Sex Pistols took to the stage at Manchester's Lesser Free Trade Hall on June 4, 1976. The reason those few people inside the venue were so inspired wasn't due to the overwhelming nature of the Pistols' musical talents, and the reality was quite the opposite. The youthful Mancunian crowd left the venue that evening believing that if Sex Pistols can make a name for themselves, with their lack of musical talent, I can too. There would be no Joy Division, New Order, Magazine, The Fall, or The Smiths if it weren't for the Sex Pistols coming down to town on June 4th. Their career was short, at least their initial run from 1975 to 1978. They only released one studio album, 1977's Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols. It is, though, considered one of the greatest albums of all time, as evidenced in music rankings from Rolling Stone and Time. Let's go deeper, lest punk fans forget. The Sex Pistols were a huge musical force that still influences listeners and artists to this day, despite their quick run. The subject is where Bollocks gets into the details. The first 7 songs of the album touch on classism, abortion, narcissism, greed, and privilege. Talk about heavy stuff. Artists today still dress like Sex Pistols, though half a decade ago, the band has still stayed in style. Without the Sex Pistols, would Kelly, Youngblood, and Mod Sun look the same? The mall punk affections for rips, pins, checkers, and plaids would be less prominent. Mod Sun, MGK, and Vicious are all in the picture. The birth of punk rock had a profound impact on music and popular culture. It has challenged the status quo and paved the way for alternative and underground music scenes to flourish. The influence of punk rock can still be felt in various subgenres today, from the grunge movement of the 1990s to the pop-punk bands of the early 2000s. Punk rock's raw energy and confrontational attitude continue to inspire musicians and artists across the globe. Artists such as Sheer Mag, Gloss, and Jake Weber have made their start in this punk rock subculture. The same messages the old, inspirational, and iconic bands started are still carried today, whether it be in your morals, political beliefs, or even your own art. Maybe you'll see someone out today with spiked hair or safety pins and a patched-up jean jacket. Might even hear one of the previously mentioned bands on the radio for a throwback day. No matter how short-lived their reign was, their legacy carries on and is admired worldwide. Nowadays, people still look to punk rock music as an outlet for many teens and young adults. May it be politically, emotionally, or just want something to listen to in a rage room. Even in the years to come, punk rock will always come back.